Welcome back to the next edition of iNN's Headlines and Beyond. My name is Dr. Daniel Karras, and I invite you to come along to this new journey, to this new experience in journalism, where we're going to explain things and show you things that you will not find anywhere else. It doesn't matter whether they're fringe organizations or they're mainstream media. This stuff is just generally not talked about. And there's a lot of reasons for this, and we will bit by bit get into the reasons why things are talked and not talked about on the news, why things are left out of the media, and a lot of times it has to do with a particular one, the view of the person, and the two, it also has to do with there are certain things that people, particularly in journalism, feel you shouldn't be touched upon. But if you are doing open investigation, you're doing open journalism, then there are no areas that shouldn't be touched upon. You should be looking at all things, because you're not going there to attack a person. This is where terms become bad, and this is an historical stuff. We talk about inquisition, to be inquiry. Well, that comes from a period of time during the Spanish Inquisition, during the Roman Catholic Church, where inquisition means to torture. That's what it did. The inquests. That the Roman Catholic Church was there to find out bad heretics, to find out people who were sinning improperly, and put them to death. So this is the origin of Inquisition. This is the origin of many cases of inquiry. And of course, it has a very negative connotation. So you shouldn't be inquiring about things. But inquiry and understanding are two different things. You're not attacking. You're not excuse me. In understanding, you're not attacking. You're not taking a position of superior or inferiority. You're taking a neutral position. You're opening, listening to what's being said, and you allow your mind to have whatever opinions or reactions you have to it. But the thing is, you don't initially come out with those reactions. You sit back and you wait. You observe, and you mull these new ideas, these new presentations over before coming to some degree of conclusion. And you're not going to come to a full conclusion, because it can come to some degree of conclusion, because, as I will explain later on, we'll get into this on a more in-depth basis as we get further into the layers of what's going on in the world, that you can never reach absolute truth. And because you don't have absolute truth or absolute knowledge, you can only have a degree of knowledge or a degree of understanding. You can never achieve the absolute. And so, understanding this, we have to be satisfied to some degree with the understanding that we currently have. And that's the current understanding, because as long as we continue moving forward with our understanding, as long as we keep trying to learn more, our understanding will grow, it will improve. But at the same time, we'll never achieve the ultimate absolute knowledge. We'll only have a degree of knowledge. And this is, mathematically, if you go into mathematics, there's this curve called an asymptotic curve. And that's a curve that has an asymptote. The asymptote is this line on a graph. The graph that you're doing in mathematics and geometry, it's like a curve. It comes up to it. Here's the line here. Here's the curve. It comes in, curves upward like this, and it keeps going up, but it never actually touches the asymptote. It approaches the asymptote, but it never actually touches the asymptote. And that's what's called an asymptotic graph, or the asymptotic line. This is actually known in the fundamentals of calculus. This is where calculus comes in, and you talk about the term called limits, the mathematical limits. And off of limits, you have derivatives and integrals for mathematics, for those of you who know calculus. And the term limit actually tells you how far you can get when in that curve without actually touching the asymptote before you can say you have arrived at that knowledge. In other words, you say in the limit, this is what this is equal to. Now, you understand right from the beginning that you never actually reach that number, or you reach that goal. You're just sort of simply saying that at this point in time, we're so close, we can say, yes, we know enough. But the thing is, this is where the danger comes in. if you start believing that you actually know or have reached the asymptote, you actually have achieved absolute knowledge, then that becomes detrimental. But if as long as you understand that you haven't reached it, you're just simply using it as a term to sort of simplify things and not keep things going on forever, giving yourself a degree of you sort of call margin of error, saying, okay, this is what we know, this is what we're satisfied with what we know, and we're happy with it. This is what we see in science when you talk about significant digits, and you see how many decimal places they have to certain things. In measurements, it's often much less than you have in calculations. And more often than not, you're taught as a scientist, as you're learning science, that when you do your measurements, they're not going to be as accurate or have as many decimal places as you would have in a calculation. And if you really want your mathematics, your calculations to match your experiments, then you have to start truncating. You have to start dropping off the decimal places in your calculations to match the least accurate measurement. In other words, you always go down towards the least understanding, the least amount of knowledge, and that's where you set your decimal places to. So let's say you only have an understanding to 2 decimal places, then all your calculations should be rounded up or down to 2 decimal places. This is the standard of significant digits, and this is a standard in science. And understanding this, we can now go into the politics of things, called the political science, and understand that we are putting together a series of knowledge. We are putting together that it is not specifically finite, and that we are only we're getting this in bits and pieces that we eventually, at some point in time, have to put together as a puzzle. In other words, we pull our pieces together. Once we have our pieces, we can sort of sit down and decide how these pieces can be organized, how they can be arranged, and how they can be put together. Some of the different ways they can be put together. And in some cases here, this is where this puzzle gets a little fuzzy, is that there are more than one ways, there's more than one way to fit these pieces together. Some of them are correct, and some of them are not correct. Some of them, so you can actually have more than one correct way of connecting things, but also that at the same time, you're going to have more than one way of connecting them wrong. And this is what we're going to go into today. We're going to go into start peeling apart some of these layers. And this is what we call decoding the Illuminati and the NWO, because we're going to go into things that other news broadcasts won't talk about, and we're going to go into it in a manner that very few others. I'm not saying very few others. I haven't seen everybody talk about this, but from the ones I've seen to talk about, they never go into this particular detail. And when they talk about Illuminati, you sit down, you're getting in with a group of people. Listen how they talk about the Illuminati. They talk about the Illuminati and these so-called conspiracy theories as these grand, monolithic conspiracies that everybody is in on in terms of these upper people, and that they are lock and step together working to take over the world. But this is what I'm talking about. This is where I come in and talk about deconstructing the NWO, the Illuminati, and the conspiracy theory, doing the decoding work. Because once you get into the history of things, you'll understand that NWO, the New World Order, is not a new thing. Matter of fact, the groups that are behind the NWO, this so-called Illuminati, have been working to create a New World Order since 800 AD. They have never succeeded. The latest attempt to create a new world order by this particular group was the Soviet Union, which collapsed in 1990. 45 years before 1990, before the collapse of the Soviet Union, that was then a new world order that was supposed to be there as a new world order. That collapsed. So 45 years before, what is that? That's 1945. Now we're talking about another group of Illuminati, the SS. They were also trying to create a new world order. That collapsed in 1945. It didn't succeed. And so what we have two particular groups now. We have a Soviet group. We have a communist group on the left, and from 1945 to 1990, trying to create a new world order, but they didn't succeed. Then you had basically from 1930 to 1945. You had another group trying to create a new world order, known as the Nazis. And they didn't succeed either. So what happens is that when we talk about the term New World Order and these different Illuminati groups, We're not talking about one thing. That this is something that's gone on in history. This is a historical event. And we can understand now that these conspiracies are not grand, they're not monolithic, and that they are very fractured and splintered. They're not what we would think of as, oh, everybody's out to get us. That we are these minute people, the people who are being crushed into this huge machine. I mean, this is what the Illuminati and these different groups want you to think. They want you to think that, oh, they're grand, they're large, they cannot be stopped. And as soon as they've done that, as soon as they've given you the idea that you cannot fight against them, this is when apathy comes in. People say, oh, well, you can't fight City Hall, you can't fight the government, you can't do this, you can't do that, because they've given up. And that is the best thing these people in power could ever have. And that's who these Illuminati are. They are people in power. They're people who have money, and particularly people who are in power. Now, I differentiate between the two, between money and power, because people in power don't always have money. The people who have money, they have power, but they don't necessarily take the power for themselves. What they'll do is they'll pay somebody to take a public face, to be the public face of power. I'll give you an example. Obama is president of the United States, but he has some degree of power, but he doesn't have the money. The people who gave him his position, who put him in the presidency, they're the ones who have power, the real power, and these are the people who have a lot of money. They have a lot of control, and they put him in there for a particular purpose. And but the thing is, it's not all one group that's doing this. There's a variety of different groups. You can take a look at this. You know, you watch the political election of Obama. Between Obama and Clinton, there was a lot of backfighting. These groups were at each other's throats. All you have to do to understand is to go back to the Dean screen. During the DNC, this is when was this? I think this was, I think John Kerry or something like that was running for president too at the same time. And you had Howard Dean, and he had him do this horrific scream, and it was played all over the world. That this guy, you know, as he had won these things, as sort of a state or something like that. He had won a state primary, and he was, you know, screaming on to the next one. But a lot of people don't realize that this guy was screaming and saying, "Oh, this guy's a nutcase." That the sound that they heard was not audible in the room. If you were in the room, you wouldn't hear the person over the crowd because the crowd was very loud. What you heard was somebody took the feed from the microphone. So there's a microphone in front of him. He screamed. What you heard was the feed from the microphone being dubbed over the videotape that we were seeing from the crowd. So it wasn't that the crowd actually saw it. What you saw was a fixed political image, a fixed political assassination of Howard Dean, because this event that we saw around the news, broadcast on CNN and every other news channel, wasn't real. It was created by the media, by a particular group of people, to destroy Howard Dean. And this is what a political assassination is. You can see this in Israel. In Israel, there's an election coming up in March. All of a sudden now, Benjamin Netanyahu, they call Bibi. If you read the journal called Haaretz, he's under investigation for criminal fraud charges. And why do these criminal fraud charges all of a sudden pop up? Because he's in an election. This is how you do political assassination. This is how you throw mud at a person to make them unelectable. Well, apparently, anyways, they're going to try to do that. It doesn't always work. And when you start looking at this, you start looking and seeing the nastiness, the brawl of politics. You begin to realize that these groups are not monolithic and that they're not all lock and step, and they are all at each other's throats. And the thing is, so I'm going to be using the term Illuminati not as a singular organization, but as an umbrella term for all clandestine organizations. And I'm talking about clandestine organizations because these are people these are organizations or secret societies that are clubs, they're social clubs for the public people who have power and money. That's what it is. And that's how these things emerged. And the thing is, they actually emerged, if you want to look back into history, you can find the emerging point in history, Well, they came out of the Roman Catholic Church because they came out of the Crusades. The Illuminati groups are all products of the Crusades, including the SS. The SS was an Illuminati group that evolved and emerged from the Knights Templar, from the Knights Hospital, from the Crusades. They were an organization that evolved from the Crusades. So they were initially a papal group. They were a papal organization that evolved into something more political. And then we'll get back into this on the other side of our break. We're going to go for a break right now. On the other side, we're going to come back. We'll talk more about this, and we'll start deconstructing a lot of what we see in the news in terms of the NWO, and of course the umbrella group, the umbrella term Illuminati. All right, see you on the other side.
iNN, uncut, unedited, and real. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Hi, my name is Dr. Daniel Karras. I'm your host for Headlines and Beyond on iNN. If you like the show we're seeing, I do not monetize my channel because there's a lot of copyright issues with this. It creates a lot of problems. So how do I make my money? Well, if you like this show, it's very simple. We do it the PBS format. I ask you for a donation, but I'm not going to ask you for a lot. Or, well, all you have to do is, if you have $1 or $2 in your pocket, take it out, put it in an envelope. I'll give you the address. It will be in the description of my channel. Go to the channel description, go to About, and you'll see the address to send the $1 or $2 that you send. All I'm asking for, $1 or $2. If you got $1 or $2 in your pocket, stick it in an envelope. Send it to iNN. That's iNN. The address is 87 Telson Road. It's 87 Telson, Telson Road. That's in Markham, Ontario. Postal code is L3R1E4. And I thank you for your support. Alrighty.
iNN, provoke, inform, and change. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Well, we were talking before on the other side, we're talking about the number of different groups of Illuminati type groups there are. They're close to about 300 that I've counted, and there's probably more out there that I haven't found. They're all pretty much the same. Their views and their reasons for different things have changed, but the end goal of the New World Order is always the same. They always want to change it. They want to evolve the world to a better world, and so on and so forth. And ironically enough, a lot of the environmental concerns, if you go back and, as I said, you do a study on these secret societies, and you'll find the environmental cause going back all the way to the base of the SS groups. You know, the SS groups from the Nazi groups, which were based on these secret societies. And in other words, the SS was an umbrella group for other secret organizations that were behind the SS. Now, the SS ideals emerged from. And if you can find these notes out there, and you can find them through Google. There are ways of finding it. It's not an easy thing to do. It took me close to 2 years to put together all these different notes, and it's not that everything's all in one place. A lot of times it's in bits and pieces, and you have to kind of piece things together. So you'll take a note from one thing, you'll watch a documentary, or you'll read something, and you'll take your notes and you just put it on the shelf, and you watch the next one, take your notes, and so on and so forth. And it actually takes a while before you start saying, hey, wait a minute here. The documentary that I had way back where starts matching up with something that was brought up in this documentary. And these documents aren't necessarily connected to each other. And this is where the bells start to ring, really, is if you have two documentaries that are not connected to each other, in terms of these authors don't know each other, and they're actually talking about the same thing, they're bringing up different perspectives of it, then you've actually got a connection now that you can go back and say, oh, there's something more going on here than I expected to. And that's how you start your sort of trek in to finding out what's actually going on. And this is sort of talk about decoding things. And it's not an easy thing. It does take months to do. I've been doing this now for about 15 years plus. there are times, like any video game, which is addicting, that you'll start off, let's say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon one day, and won't finish until, let's say, noon the next day. And the thing is, just a few more minutes. And it's when you get on this good track, you start finding information, you start piecing things together. You don't want to stop. You can't stop, because that success pushes you forward. And of course, you end up, at the end of the day, stumbling off the bed because you're so punch drunk from studying that you can't walk properly, and you need the wall to hold you up. And I've been there many times. And this is sort of, as you look at this stuff, and you say, can I do this stuff as an average person watching? I said, yeah, because it's not that I knew this stuff initially. This is not stuff that I learned or knew initially. This is stuff that I eventually got to know. And it's open to anybody. And this is what I'm talking about, providing an open service to the sex professionals of Canada. This is when we're going to be hopefully emailing them more and letting them know that as long as the people start watching this, anyone who starts watching this, the more you watch, the more you're going to learn. It's that simple. If at some point in time when you're watching, you really like the stuff, start taking notes. I will be giving recommendations at the end of each video on reading in different areas of study. Throughout here, you see, I've actually recommended several options to go out to study. Like if you want to go out and study Illuminati, you can do that. You can do a Google search on that. You can do a Google search on the Crusades. You can do a Google search on the Roman Catholic Church and the evolution of the Roman Catholic Church. You can do a Google search on Mossad and find out what the Mossad is doing to sort of start piecing together. And then these don't have to be grand projects. They're just simply, do what you can, get as far as you can go, or as far as you want to go, and then, that's your initial step in. It takes about 5 years to build a good library, in terms of your base library. Your base library is what you start with. It takes about 5 years to build a good base library, and anyone can do it. You need a laptop or a computer with a good internet connection and a thumb drive. I got one here someplace. Well, this will do a good job with a thumb drive. This is a thumb drive here. It attaches to the USB port. You can put cards in it, the memory cards, and that's a good start for a library. In terms, you could build a good library on that in terms of your base library, and that's where you start to learn from. And as we talk about the evils in society, we talk about how evil evolves. We talk about the evils of psychology. How what's going on here. And the thing is, you have in psychology from the 1960s and 1970s several good experiments, particularly in the 1970s, several good experiments that demonstrate the evils of psychology. One was done by Philip Zimbardo, and it actually has a lot of relevance today. Dr. Philip Zimbardo was actually talking about Abu Ghraib. A while ago, he did a TED Talk on Abu Ghraib. He was invited to the UN to speak on Abu Ghraib because he did an experiment in the 1970s at the University of Stanford University, that became infamous. He took two groups of people. He initially got a general group of people, I think between 20 and 25 people, and split them up into two groups. One is the police, or the guards, and the other prisoners, half and half. He initially randomly grounded everybody, did an initial thing, and then randomly separated the group into two. So there was no way of planting one group of people who were sadistic and one people who weren't sadistic. They were just simply randomly split. They both went home for the night. In the middle of the night, Philip Zimbardo had arranged for the police to go and pick up the ones who were going to be classified as prisoners. And the prison was a makeshift facility created in the basement of Stanford University in the psychology department. This is where it took place. The prisoners were brought in, and the new guards, the students who were assigned to guard, began doing their duty, began doing what they were instructed to do. Within 3 days, the prison system had completely broken down. You had 2 or 3 students being taken to hospital because these are prisoners. The prisoner students were taken to hospital for complete mental breakdowns. What had happened? The guards had become sadistic. the guards had become the personification of evil. They began not physically, but emotionally and psychologically torturing the patients. And the thing is, the professor, Dr. Philip Zimbardo, who set himself up as ward and said, "Oh, I'll see if anything goes wrong," didn't see what was happening. He didn't understand what was going on there. It took somebody from the outside to come in and say, "Hey, 2 of your students have been taken to hospital. This has got to stop." It took that outside intervention to stop the experiment. And what we see here is we see that when authority is given to people, that authority more often than not is abused. It doesn't matter who these people are. It doesn't matter what their ethics or background is. They become sadistic. Matter of fact, in many cases, when there's one group, it doesn't have to be everybody in the sadistic. It has to be 1 or 2 who have an assertive personality, and that the others become afraid of and say, "Well, I'm going to follow that guy because he's doing what I'm going to do what he's told. It's not my fault because he started it. This is the excuse. Well, it wasn't me. It was him, and I was sort of just doing what I was supposed to do." And this is the excuse. And the thing is, if you sit back and watch Ferguson, this is the riots in Ferguson. Watch the whole event. Watch it from start to finish, including what's happened after. And you'll see the police not only attacking the black people, the black students, but you'll also see the police attacking the media, the press, and anybody who challenged their authority. Go on the internet. Go onto YouTube and type in the word police abuse. And you will find an equal ratio of black and white police abuse. In other words, you'll find police officers, both black and white, abusing people of all various race and colors. So you'll see that there is no real racial thing. The problem is, this goes back to this Stanford University experiment by Dr. Philip Zimbardo. That's what's going on. And I think this is known about. It's not something that's unknown. And yet, the higher-ups, the political people who create these police organizations, know this. So why would a higher-up, people who empower, people who are part of these Illuminati groups, do this? Simple, because it's not about democracy, it's about power and control. They want to see how far they can push government control. And this is what the whole fight is over with the NRA. It's about power and control. And this experiment pops up again on the border patrol, on the borders with the border guard, and this whole issue of illegal immigration. Illegal immigration has nothing to do about immigration. It has to do with control of people within the society of America. It has to do with the elimination of democracy in America. And you hear, how do I say this? You go back to another experiment called the Stanley Milgram experiment. And I have this listed out here. It's Stanley, Stanley, Milgram. That's Milgram experiment. Look that up. And what you'll find is that Stanley Milgram wanted to see how the Nazis were able to convince the German society to go along with what Hitler wanted. In other words, yeah, Hitler was a monster, but who carried out the orders for Hitler? The government did. The bureaucracy did. And everyone followed in these horrible things that were happening. Everyone followed lock and step. And at the end of the day, they said, "It's not my fault. I was simply following orders." And the thing is that what was the Stanley Milgram experiment? It was an experiment done in the 1970s to find out, the stated purpose was to see how the Nazis could do what they did. The hidden and underlying purpose, if you understand that all experiments in the United States, particularly these research departments, including psychology, and all you have to do is look up the term MK Ultra, understand that all psychology experiments in the United States, all psychology research, was funded by the Department of Defense. In other words, all of this experiments, Philip Zimbardo, Stanford University, including the Stanley Milgram experiment, this was all part of the Department of Defense. The same thing with Timothy Leary and the LSD experiments. That was all the Department of Defense funding that stuff. The 60s was a social psychological experiment produced by the Department of Defense. It was created by the government. LSD was created by the government. in these research labs. So this is what, when people wonder why you have the failure on the war on drugs, because there was never a war on drugs. You can't have a war on drugs if you are the drug provider. It was about something else. It was about power and control. It was about teaching the CIA how to control a society. And this is what the Stanley Milgram experiment was. The Stanley Milgram experiment was how to get an authority figure, like a general or something like that, to get the lower subordinates to do sadistic things. And this experiment was set up as you had basically three people. You had the person in the booth hooked up to electrical wires. You had the person asking the question, who was the lower person. He was the government person, if you will, called the teacher. You had the person in the room hooked up to the wires who was going to answer all the questions. You had an electrical box that shocked people, including up to a lethal level. And you had a authority figure standing over the person who was actually doing the sadistic work. And they started off on a low number, shocking a person, whether the person got their answer right or wrong. The goal was not to see whether or not the person could answer right. It wasn't a question of positive or negative reinforcement. The goal was to see how far that the authority figure could push the subordinate into doing sadistic things. And the thing is, again, there was no pre-assignment in selecting who was doing what. And the thing is that it was unbelievable that the authority figure could get the subordinate to push a button with electrical charge large enough that the charge would have been lethal. And you can actually see the person screaming in pain as the button is being pushed. And the thing is that this is what we see on the Border Patrol here, with the TSA. This is an exercise by the government to see how far they can push subordinates into torturing American citizens on the border on the excuse of border security. This whole issue of security in the airports to prevent another 9/11 is all a lie. It's a fabrication. It's a creation by the CIA. Why? To create government control, to see how far they can push the TSA to corralling and capturing the American populace. And this is unbelievable how people in the United States have fallen for this. Something that is fundamentally a lie. And then when we come back on the other side, we will go into further evils, including human trafficking and why the government is involved in human trafficking. They are the biggest offenders in human trafficking. And we'll get to this when we come back on the other side.
iNN, uncut, unedited, and real. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Hi, my name is Dr. Daniel Karras. I'm your host for Headlines and Beyond on iNN. If you like the show we're seeing, I do not monetize my channel because there's a lot of copyright issues with this. It creates a lot of problems. So how do I make my money? Well, if you like this show, it's very simple. We do it the PBS format. I ask you for a donation, but I'm not going to ask you for a lot. Or, well, all you have to do is, if you have $1 or $2 in your pocket, take it out, put it in an envelope. I'll give you the address. It will be in the description of my channel. Go to the channel description, go to About, and you'll see the address to send the $1 or $2 that you send. All I'm asking for $1 or $2. If you got $1 or $2 in your pocket, stick it in an envelope. Send it to iNN. That's iNN. The address is 87 Telson Road. It's 87 Telson, Telson Road. That's in Markham, Ontario. Postal code is L3R184. And I thank you for your support. Alrighty.
iNN, provoke, inform, and change. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Welcome back to the other side of our break. And this is our last segment here for today. And we're talking about how the power, the government, is so fundamentally corrupt. And they've been lately, in the last few years now, we're going back into a psychopathic society. And when I talk about a psychopathic society, we're going to a society that cannot tell right from wrong. That cannot tell that something is wrong just because everybody's doing it. And the example here would be on the left side here, because primarily the psychopath is created primarily on the socialist side of things. But the thing is, I would also like to point out that the religious right are not exempt from this, and I will present this shortly. We talk about, because we often hear of the humane society, the humane arguments from the Democrats on how everybody should be treated equally, and how there should not be a death penalty because you shouldn't be killing people. Well, and this is what you see in January 31st in the Spiegel. You actually hear an article written by the guy named from Marcus. It's called "The Myth of Humane Killing." He's talking about that there is no such thing as humane death penalty. Ironically enough, in the same issue, in the same few weeks, actually, there was an argument supporting abortion and an argument supporting euthanasia for the elderly and for those who feel that they are a burden to society, who want to die, called death with dignity. And now saying people have the right to die, and enforcing medical facilities who were once sworn by the Hippocratic Oath to preserve life, they are now becoming institutions that provide death. And what do I talk about? Because what is abortion? Abortion means to stop something. That's what actually the term means. Abortion, by definition, means to stop something, to abort it. But what are you actually aborting? You're aborting a human life. But except, well, we're not actually aborting a human life because they've changed the definition of human life to exclude the human being inside the fetus. The fetus is no longer classified as a human being, so therefore it's no longer murder, and we're now going to call it abortion. Were they just talking about the myth of humane killing? We saw this before, actually, with Hitler saying that all defectives in the Auschwitz camps should be. This not only just not include Jews, but include all Jews, homosexuals, gypsies, Slavs, a number of people, including the mud races who were interred in these camps, all were scheduled to be euthanized. And I understand that the term euthanize or euthanasia is a Greek term for happy death. That these people are going up happily going to their death, and that they are going to be happy in the end. So it's not something that's bad. Euthanasia is not something bad. It's something that's good. And then, of course, now, hey, since you're having a good death and you're happy about it, you're having a happy death, well, why not give this to the elderly, right? You know, elderly's feeling depressed, or a person who's defective, who has a particular issue like multiple sclerosis. Hey, I know you're feeling depressed and everything, but there's a solution. A good news, we can kill you if you want to. You know, you don't have to be a burden to your family and stuff like that. You know, we can, you know, more than easily kill you if you want that. And of course, they'll stand up and then say this person's brave for taking the step into suicide, and that we will assist them and will provide them with the best suicide. And you'll see this on the news. You see families gathered together to watch somebody commit suicide. And they say these people are brave. And this is what I talk about, a psychopathic society. They don't understand this. The people in the room don't understand that this is wrong, that this is murder. And they wonder how did the Nazis do what they did? Simple. The society at the time was psychopathic. It didn't understand what was going on in the death camps there were wrong. They thought everyone's going to be euthanized. They're going to have a happy death. That these people are going to be put out of their misery. That these people were suffering. That there was no way to fix what they were suffering from, and then the only way to cure them, the one way to make them happy, was to give them an ultimate happy ending, the final solution, The ultimate happy ending. The ultimate happy ending is euthanasia. It's the happy death. That's what they thought. And so, okay, you're having a happy death, then hey, no problem. You're enjoying your dying. And this is what we see here. We look at the news. Look for these suicide. These people who commit suicide. This is in Europe, in Canada now, and in England. Look at the fanfare around it. Look at the solemn notes, the cards. You know, it's just like somebody's having a birth, and now someone's committing suicide. So, we're having a death. We're having a happy death today. They're celebrating. You can now find Harlem Art cards. Have a happy death. This is the hallmark of a psychopathic society. And how do we end up producing these things? Well, we produce these things through sexual abuse. Sexualize your children. Turn them into... Believe that your children are sex objects. And there are people, and I've got documentaries on this, and these are primarily artists or photographers and stuff like that, who photograph their children naked. Say, whoa, I'm not a pedophile. Children are natural sexual beings. They enjoy sexuality. They enjoy being naked. Really? How many girls do you know love being naked in front of? How many girls hide their face behind the camera because they don't want to be seen, because they don't think they look good, because they have particular body issues? We're talking about that. Really, they want to be naked. How many girls do you know who want to be naked? And then think of this. If you understand that, how do you get a girl to be naked, to want to be naked? What do you have to do to take them from that point of not wanting to be naked to being naked? And what you see here is we see, again, these Illuminati groups, these people of power, popping up in the news here. In 2014, early in 2014, we heard the chief of the IMF. His name was Dominic Strauss-Kahn. He was arrested. No, this is actually 2011. He was arrested in New York for sexually assaulting a maid. He was given house arrest in his penthouse. He was sent to house arrest in his penthouse while his case was being heard. And of course, at some point in time, he admitted to having sex with a maid. He admitted to not treating her properly. But they were able to get the maid to turn around and say, well, it wasn't rape. This was part of a sex game. And of course, he was let off and disappeared. And people, oh, well, that was the end of it. And I was, he had a lot of conspiracy theories going around, but they died down after a while. And of course, most of the American papers didn't think of anything about this. And I didn't think of anything either. We sort of passed the news and out it goes. Until this popped up in an Indian newspaper. This is actually an Indian newspaper, but in a North American newspaper. And it says, Lil France, this is it, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, former IMF chief who was tipped to become the French president before being accused of sexual assault. In other words, this was somebody else, some other Illuminati member, who didn't want him in his position, and said about this charge, giving the stuff up, that was political assassination. We'll testify to a criminal court on Tuesday. This is actually 2015. This article is dated to February 10th, 2015. So this is more than 4 years later. Will testify to a criminal court on Tuesday over his alleged role in sex parties with prostitutes. The allegations he participated in a French sex ring has dogged the once prominent socialist ever since criminal charges were dropped against him in the New York case. He has settled a civil case with the chambermaid that was the one he raped. His 65 is accused of instigating parties he knew involved prostitutes between 2008 and 2011 in the French city of Lille, and also in Brussels and in Paris, and in Washington, D.C. Then the lawyers acknowledged their clients took part in the party, but says he did not know the women were prostitutes. You know, and what's happening? This is you know, this is a characteristic of the Illuminati. When they get caught with something, there's a tendency to start scapegoating and start pointing fingers at everybody in direct. So imagine this: you have a bunch of kids who do something wrong. You don't know exactly what they do wrong. All you have to do is turn to one kid, and that one kid, I'm going to guarantee you, is going to rat everybody else out. And as soon as that starts happening, the other kids are going to turn around and start ratting everybody else out. And this is what you have here, is you having various different Illuminati people, when they get caught with something, starting to rat each other out. And this is where you start picking up the pieces to find out what's going on behind the scenes within these secret societies. And the thing is, when you understand this is going on, you understand that in France, in Belgium, in Italy, in the Netherlands, in the Scandinavian countries, what's happening with these open sexual societies? They have record highs of sexually trafficking women and children. They want their appetite for women and children is basically goes from the ages of 8 years old. 8 years old is the youngest girl and boy, up to the ages of 20 years old. So in other words, these people they're creating a demand for this, and what they do is, because they have power, because they have influence, they're changing the laws to allow pedophilia into the school system. When you hear the people talking about bringing in advanced sexual education into the school system, they're not talking about bringing in anatomy classes. They're talking about teaching kids how to have sex. They're sexualizing the children, and they're going. And Sweden is actually proud of this. Sweden is proud that it is sexualizing children. It is teaching children about sex from the age of 6 years old. Understand that Michael Jackson, who was another member of Illuminati, he was a member of these different groups. This is why you had the Rabbi Shmuley Batei hanging around him. Rabbi Shmuley Batei actually represented the Kabbalist groups, the Jewish secret societies. And they're different. They're not all the same society as I pointed out before. They're different societies, different groups of people. But they all behave in a very similar manner. And what do you see here? You see that they're trying to sexualize children. You see that they're trying, with Michael Jackson. In his room, they brought out his special room where he I guess he played with himself and sort of prepared for what he's going to do to the little boys. That he used to like to lick as an ice cream cone. This was one of his phrases. And this is where the Jesus juice came in. They had pictures of little babies in there. 2 years old, 3 years old. And we know that there are people out there, pedophiles out there, who like babies. And Michael Jackson had this in his room. This was part of the evidence. All that evidence got tossed out. Look at Michael Jackson now. None of this stuff is ever mentioned. None of this stuff is mentioned. And it'd be very difficult to find online. And they say, well, we're talking about the left who have no morals. This is socialism. That's all this is occurring in. But the thing, as I said before, you can't exempt the left. You can't exempt the religious right either. And the religious right are brought up in the Talmud and the Quran. They both have sections that talk about rape, that talk about sexuality. In the Quran, with Islam, you have the bed of muta, right? This is what it's called, the bed of muta. Muta is the bed of a slave girl. It is the rape of a woman. Here, the woman has no right to sexual intercourse in women. It's the total domination of the man, right? In the Quran, this is where it comes from. It's stated in the Quran. Well, this is not part of the Quran. Well, here it is. Lawful for you is what is beyond all that you may seek using your wealth in wedlock and not in license. So those of whom you enjoy, give them their appointed wages. It is no fault in you in agreeing together after the due appropriate appropriation. God is all knowing and all wise. In other words, and this comes from the point in time when Prophet Muhammad was in Medina between 622 and 632 AD, about a decade, where he was involved in prostitution. He's talking about the time, and they have it. This is from an Islamic scholarship site. At the time, the men in Medina used to seek enjoyment from women for a limited period of time in exchange for a specified sum. In other words, as long as there's a contract, hey, no problem. There's consent there, right? You hear people talking about, oh, in school we're going to teach about consent. Well, there it is. And then we're going to talk about the religious right. The religious right cannot excuse themselves from this because within their philosophies, within their theologies, they have loopholes in their morals that allow them to commit these sexual abuses. Anyways, that's it for today. I'd like to point out that our study for today, or reading for today, is to study all the works of George Orwell. Our basic reading was George Orwell's 1984 and Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. That was our standard reading. These two books, 1984 and The Prince, will help you understand much of what's going on in the world today. It is the base that a lot of the mechanics that we see today are going on. They occur in these books here. They're the base of all dystopian novels. And when you talk about dystopian novels or dystopian books, these are the origins. George Orwell's 1984 and Niccolo Machiavelli. These are the two fundamental authors. And anyways, that's it for today. And I will see you in the next segment, or next edition. The next edition of iNN's Headlines and Beyond. My name is Dr. Daniel Karras. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us. Alrighty, and goodbye.
iNN, uncut, unedited, and real. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Hi, my name is Dr. Daniel Karras. I'm your host for Headlines and Beyond on iNN. If you like the show we're seeing, I do not monetize my channel because there's a lot of copyright issues with this. It creates a lot of problems. So how do I make my money? Well, if you like this show, it's very simple. We do it the PBS format. I ask you for a donation, but I'm not going to ask you for a lot. Or, well, all you have to do is, if you have $1 or $2 in your pocket, take it out, put it in an envelope. I'll give you the address. It will be in the description of my channel. Go to the channel description, go to About, and you'll see the address to send the $1 or $2 that you send. All I'm asking for $1 or $2. If you got $1 or $2 in your pocket, stick it in an envelope. Send it to iNN. That's iNN. The address is 87 Telson Road. It's 87 Telson, Telson Road. That's in Markham, Ontario. Postal code is L3R184. And I thank you for your support. Alrighty.
iNN, provoke, inform, and change. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Welcome. Welcome to the library, and I am the librarian.
I am the professor. And professor of what? Professor of physics.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
Free speech rules here at Democratic Earth.